Thank you, Claire Corla. I wanted to ask the Taoiseach and the Minister for Social Protection if her department has done any sort of gender analysis of the cuts in social welfare that have taken place in the last number of years. If there's been any study of the impact in particular on women, because it would seem that the axe in particular is falling on women disproportionately, who tend to have responsibility for children in particular.
Thank you.
The Department of Social Protection recently published a social impact assessment of the main tax and social welfare measures for 2015 based on the ESRI tax welfare model called Switch. The analysis found that there is no difference in the risk of poverty rate for men and women as a result of the last budget. The ESRI, on foot of a commission from the Equality Authority, they've examined the impact of policy changes on men and women over the period 2009 to 2013. The findings were published last October in a report called "The Gender Impact of Tax and Benefit Changes." The report analyses the effects on disposable income due to changes to public sector pay, tax, PRSI and welfare payments. The average loss for all households over this period was 9.6% of disposable income. Less than a fifth of the reduction in disposable income can be attributed to welfare changes, while 3/5 of the reduction in disposable income can be attributed to taxation and PRSI changes, and obviously the introduction of the USC. The remainder of the reduction in disposable income was caused by reductions in public sector pay. The report found that retired single people experienced a loss of 4.5% in disposable income over the period. However, social welfare changes over the period resulted in a slight increase in disposable income of 0.1%, with the same impact for men and women. Single people without children experienced an average loss in disposable income of 9.5%. Welfare changes resulted in a 1.4% loss in disposable income for women, which was slightly lower than the 1.6% loss for men. Female lone parents experienced an overall loss of 9.1%, of which welfare accounted for 4.4%, and couple-headed households on average experienced 11.9% reduction in disposable income. And separate research conducted on behalf of the Department by Dorothy Watson of the ESRI suggests that in Ireland, income is shared fully across coupled households, meaning that any loss of income and hence change in living standards is likely to be equally shared across the household. And as the adults in that household would consist significantly of a man and a woman, the effects are shared equally.
Thank you. Deputy Coppinger.
This would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. I'll just give you a list of the cuts that you brought in, which would primarily fall on women. The cuts to child benefit, again, mainly hits women, being reduced by €10 to 130 for the first and second child, and by 18 for a third child. So if you have a larger family, you're going to be hit even more. Back to school clothing, footwear allowance. Rent allowance cuts, we know primarily it's single women who are facing homelessness. The fuel allowance has been cut from 32 to 27 weeks. Maternity pay. And of course the one-parent family cuts that all on this House have told you, and all of the single-parent organisations have told you, are hitting women. 90% of lone parents are women. 34% of births in this country are to single mothers. So therefore there's a huge impact falling on women from these cuts that you've started, and you're talking about continuing on. One-parent families headed by women are twice as likely to be in poverty. How could you possibly argue that these cuts won't further increase the feminisation of poverty, which is accelerated under this government? And Taoiseach, if you could keep your remarks to the social welfare cuts that I asked about, rather than talking about couples under the budget recently, please.
Well, your question is whether there's an analysis been done, and I have said to you and it's available, you can go into the library and get it, that the ESRI has carried out an analysis of what has happened. Well, just let me say to you now, and maybe if you think about this, you'll appreciate what I'm saying. One of the most significant cohorts of women who get income support from social welfare are women who are on the state retirement pension, either contributory or non-contributory. Now, 34% of all spending in social welfare goes to people who have retired and are on the state retirement, contributory, non-contributory pensions, and widows and widowers' pensions. And in fact, what the actuarial review of the Social Insurance Fund, which was last done in 2012, shows that the fund provides much better value to female rather than to male contributors. And that is why, for instance, in relation to the very significant group of women who are retirees and on state pension, that in fact their at risk of poverty is actually below 2%, and in fact the reduction of their at risk of poverty, as with lone parents, because of social welfare transfers, is among the highest in the European Union. It's 60%. So in fact the social welfare system, whether at pension age for people who've retired or for people of working age, like lone parents, is in fact a huge protector because of the transfers that are made from people at work to people who are on social welfare. It's a huge protector of people against poverty.
Deputy Coppinger.
Minister, I don't know if you've read this report. It's called Women, Austerity and Inequality, Ursula Berry and Pauline Conroy, commissioned by the National Women's Council and TASC. I don't know what figures you're plucking out of thin air there, but I'll just give you a few conclusions from this report. They conclude that equality was cast aside as a marginal issue in the big picture of the crisis. Lone parents, low paid and poor, special targets for raising cash to recapitalise the banks. And that's only, I don't have time in the 30 seconds that I have left, but you might read that report. But look, people out there know what's in their pockets, and what you've done is you broke two particular promises that the Labour Party made in the last election: child benefit cuts, and also a promise that you would not introduce the one-parent family cut for 7-year-olds unless there was a Scandinavian-style childcare. You said that last July, but you're going ahead regardless. You've talked earlier on about after-school clubs. They cost money, and whatever scheme you've set up is in very, very few schools. And the idea that women can just leave their children aged 7 to become latchkey kids to bail out the banks in this country is absolutely disgraceful. Those kids already only have one parent in the home with them, and they're to reside alone. Joanna Tuffy thinks that kids can mind themselves from 1:30 in the day till 6 in the evening. That's quite incredible, the low that the Labour Party has stooped in its attack on women.
Well, I mean, you obviously have a difficulty in accepting the work that's been done by the ESRI or the actuarial review of the Social Insurance Fund, which shows that women actually get the best value. Now, clearly, you asked about an analysis. You asked in your question about analysis in relation to social welfare, and I'm saying to you what the reports are showing. Now, you need to sit down, study the reports and consider them. They're not my reports, they're independent reports. But what I do want to take issue with you is this. In January, I was very happy on behalf of the Labour Party and of Fine Gael in this government to be able to increase child benefit by €5 a month per child. I don't know if you've actually taken that into your calculations, but that is why the budget analysis that has been done, which the Department commissioned, shows that in fact this budget has benefited families with children, including lone parents, because, as you know, child benefit is a universal payment which is paid generally to the mother. and it's paid to people whether they're in work or whether they're out of work. And I would have thought that you would have welcomed the improvement in child benefit, which we hope to have again as the economy progresses and people go back to work. We hope to have again in this year's budget for next year.
Thank you. Question number